Schizoid PD, pervasive pattern of detachment from social relationships. Um, Very limited range of emotions in interpersonal situations. The etiology is unclear. Features are childhood shyness, preference for social isolation, which resembles autism. I have the criteria here for schizoid PD, which you are going to go over on your own. All the criteria that I included in the PowerPoints, I would like you to go over on your own, okay? And I trust that you're going to do that. And you know why I trust you're going to do that? Because I know you're going to go through it and you're going to say, Lisa included these in the PowerPoint presentation. Gee, they must be important, or she never would have included them. And you would be absolutely correct. Okay, so please, do go over them because they are important. All right, next, treatment options for schizoid PD. Okay, so little is known, all right, about personality disorders. So not much research is done because they're so hard to treat effectively. And the ego syntonic, as we mentioned before, few people bring themselves into therapy, right? They don't seek professional help because they don't have the problem everyone else does. So that makes it difficult for research and to treat, right? Because we can't find out if the treatment is effective or not if people are coming in for treatment only when they're mandated, right? And they don't care to be there. So that's not really giving the treatment a fair shot. Okay, so it makes it very difficult. But when they do come in for treatment, the focus is on the value of interpersonal relationships. So, you want to help them develop empathy and build social skills. Let's see. So what I would do, all right, if a client came in that really, had these issues that you needed to work on, I would first start by cognitive therapy. I would sit down and explain to them the value of the relationships, right? I would help them to understand the importance of the relationship, to not take it for granted. Once they understand these things, then they can behave in a way that would, help them maintain a solid relationship and be able to sustain good, healthy relationships. But, you know, they need to understand these things first. And what I would do after the cognitive therapy and helping them understand, I would help them behave that way that is most appropriate. So I may do role playing, which I found extremely beneficial to my clients. What I would do is have them, I would say, okay, just in this particular situation, how would you normally react? Or give me a situation that you've been in where, you had a problem or, the situation ended up negatively somehow. And so I would say, act that out. And so they would, go ahead and act a situation out, but they would be themselves and act the way they typically would act. Then I would look at that and I'd say, okay, why don't you try maybe acting in this way? So I would then role play the part of the client, but doing so in a more appropriate way. After I did that, and this is important to do, allow the client again to act out this new way because it's new for them. Remember, they're not used to behaving in an appropriate manner. So it is new to them. So even though they understand it, it's very important to allow them to execute the new behavior so that they become comfortable acting in this way and confident in it, which helps them because they're more likely to actually behave this way when they're presented with this situation, right? So they're, feeling comfortable and confident, and they are definitely more likely to behave this way when they're used to doing so, when they've done so, when they feel good about it. So, allow them that. And then, from there, you keep honing in on things, and, they'll present different situations, different issues. And you can, role playing has been very, very helpful. Um, it's been a good tool for me to use with clients. So keep that in mind. All right. Lack of good outcome studies is, like I said, due to the lack of treatment, um, and, well, lack of being able to use the treatment appropriately, and lack of research ability because of the denial, or, I don't even want to say denial, they just do not come into therapy and do not acknowledge that they have the issue. Same thing. Okay. This is the personality disorder. It's schizotypal. All right. So schizotypal PD. Some of the features: behavior and dress is odd and unusual. Socially isolated and highly suspicious individuals. Magical thinking, illusions, and ideas of reference. Okay. So illusions, they're not as severe as a hallucination or a delusion. So, but you can think of an illusion as like an experience of like feeling the presence of another person. You're not actually hearing things or seeing things, but you're just like kind of feeling, you're perceiving another presence being around. Just look at it like that. So it's not as severe as a delusion or hallucination, but it's, a perception, a feeling. So, an example of ideas of reference, that is when an individual believes that things have like a special personal meaning or significance. So, for instance, if they see a license plate that had particular numbers, for instance, they might say, "Oh, that means I'm going to have a great day today," or whatever. But it's, equating something with a personal significant meaning to you. Okay, so that's ideas of reference. Many people with schizotypal personality disorder meet the criteria for major depression. Some conceptualize schizotypal to resemble a milder form of schizophrenia. Okay, and when we get to schizophrenia, you'll kind of understand these things of why. All right, here we have once again criteria for schizotypal PD, which you will go over on your own. And okay, so the causes of schizotypal PD. It's a mild, they wonder, like a lot of this, like we've discussed in class many times, is possibilities. They're not definite. They're not things we know for sure, but they're good possibilities. Ideas that psychology profession has that, may be the causes. So they wonder: mild expression of schizophrenia genes, possibly. Um, they say more likely to develop after childhood maltreatment, okay, or trauma, especially in men. So that someone is more likely to develop schizotypal personality after some kind of trauma in childhood, or being maltreatment in childhood, right? And they found that was especially so in men. More generalized brain deficits may be present. So problems with learning or memory, they found to be one of the, possibilities. Okay. All right. So treatment options address comorbid depression. So, all right, it says 30 to 50% meet the criteria for major depression, right? So the main focus is on developing social skills. You address the fact that there is comorbidity with the client. Medical treatment is similar to that used with schizophrenia. The treatment prognosis is generally poor. We'll be going through many when we get to schizophrenia too, many of the treatment options. Okay. Here, once again, we have, yeah, this is, so I put in here the clusters of, the cluster A personality disorders, so paranoid, schizoid, and schizotypal. These are things I would like cut out and put like in my notebook or keep in a file because they're very helpful references. Or you could buy a DSM-5. Okay, so my favorite is antisocial personality disorder. It's very intriguing and very difficult, and I know many people with this disorder, which is probably one of the reasons I'm so interested in it because I know several people like this. Anyway, okay, so ASPD. Now, keep in mind that antisocial personality disorder does not mean that the person is not sociable, right? It doesn't mean that they are shy or withdrawn. Not at all. What this means in this context is, it's easier or more accurate to look at it as being anti-society, right? So they don't um, adhere to social norms. So it's not like antisocial is not being sociable. It's just not being adhering to social norms. So anti-society. Yeah, just think of it like that. Okay, so ultimately the individual is self-interested. Um, they're opposing the basic values of society. So like trust, cooperation, nonviolence, being moral. All right, they fail to comply with social norms. They violate the rights of others. They're irresponsible. They're impulsive. They're deceitful. They lack conscience. They lack empathy. They lack remorse. So like a sociopath and psychopathy typically refer, when you hear them terms, they refer to ASPD. So they're very similar traits. So these individuals can be very, very charming, okay, and they're interpersonally manipulative. They are very manipulative in the way that they can. I've seen situations where people that have been trained, um, maybe working in a prison to work with these individuals and to distance themselves, have been fooled into believing someone with ASPD because they're so good. They are so good at manipulating. So you really have to watch this. And I've seen many people, friends, many people get, fooled um, into believing and falling for the lines that someone with antisocial personality disorder would give them. Because they're good. They're good at that. Remember, they've been doing this their whole life. Since childhood, they've been acting in this way. And they utilize people as a means to their end. So they've become accustomed. They've developed skills in these ways, in manipulating rather than the way we need to recondition them to be. So keep that in mind, that they're very manipulative, they act very charming, and they violate the rights of others. And they're big traits of someone with ASPD. Significant. Okay, so so ASPD often show early histories of behavioral problems, including conduct disorder, right? So callous, unemotional type of conduct disorder is more likely to evolve into ASPD, right? So if they're unemotional and callous when they're young, and they're not treated for it, and this keeps going and progresses oftentimes into antisocial personality disorder. Families with inconsistent parental discipline and support. So if your child is, or someone's child is acting inappropriately, and the parents and family do not, direct them accordingly, don't discipline them the way they should, they continue on acting as if these ways and their manners are appropriate, and they're not, right? So they're not scolded, they're not told the right way to behave. Therefore, the way they've been behaving is typical and normal, and it's fine with them, and how always has been. So when they are confronted with having to behave differently, they look at it as, that's wrong, because it's not the life I was taught, that I was raised living around. And so social environment, like we talk about in class, is a biggie. And it kind of, if someone young had been, just say they're 9 or 10, so ever since they were a kid, a baby, basically, they've been living like this for 10 years. They go in to one of their, just say if they met somebody at school and became friends with them, they go into their household and they don't live like that. They live totally different. They're going to look at their friend as being strange, right? I'm used to having people like in my house doing drugs, like since I was a kid. So this is kind of odd that you guys sit down and have a family meal at the same time and do homework and things like that. Like, these are things that are odd for someone that had grown up with it, in that atmosphere. So you got to realize that these things took a long time, to develop this type of personality disorder, and it's not going to disappear in a day. In fact, it's going to be very difficult to try to help an individual even realize that, their behavior is not okay, and that violating the rights of others is not okay, when their parents had let that go for so long. All right, so families often have a history of criminal and violent behavior. Once again, they grew up with, maybe drug dealers and, cop cars and police and, their families in prison. So to them, that's norm. That's the norm. All right. So let's see if we can go a little further since my alarm went off. Okay, good. I'm going to stop right here, and then I'm going to continue the next clip on neurobiological content.